You ever have a moment that starts off so normal, you don't even see it coming? I was just tucking my son in. Pajamas, nightlight, soft pillow, nothing unusual. Same bedtime routine we'd done 1,000 times. I even kissed his forehead. Smiled. Said, "Sweet dreams, Bridger." And then he looked up at me. Eyes too big for his little face. And he asked me, "Mom, are you in love with Mr. Jack?" Just like that. Like he was asking what we were having for dinner. Like it wasn't the kind of question that could burn down an entire life. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't even breathe. Because in that split second, I knew two things. He saw something. And worse? He understood it. No, he's just a kid. No, he doesn't get it. He got it. All of it. And that's when it hit me. Not just what I'd done. But who I'd pulled into the wreckage with me. The guilt? It didn't whisper. It screamed. Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard something so quiet, but it shattered your whole world anyway? Tell me in the comments, yes or no. And if you've ever carried something you couldn't say out loud, hit like. Subscribe if you've ever been scared of your own truth. Because this isn't just a story. It's a confession. And it doesn't end where you think it does. That night, I thought I was just putting my son to bed. Turns out, I was waking up to a truth I couldn't unhear. And a version of myself I never wanted to meet. From the outside, my life looked fine. More than fine, actually. White picket fence type stuff. Big house on a quiet street. 2 healthy kids. A husband who didn't cheat, didn't drink, didn't raise his voice. We had matching pajamas for Christmas. Professional photos in the hallway. Labeled pantry containers. People used to say, "You're so lucky, miracle." And for a while I said, "I know." But inside that house? I didn't feel lucky. I felt used up. Like I was a background process. Running quietly in the back, keeping everything from crashing. Keith, my husband, he was good at making things look good. Always on time. Always dressed right. Always polite. But when he walked in the door, he didn't really see me. He'd give me a quick nod, ask if the mortgage got paid, if I'd scheduled the termite inspection. Never once, not once, did he stop and ask, "Hey, how are you doing, really?" And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself that, too. I became a to-do list with legs. Groceries. Dishes. Appointments. Smile. Don't complain. Be grateful. And if there was anything left of me at the end of the day, I'd sit with it quietly until I fell asleep, sometimes with tears still drying on my cheek. The only time Keith touched me anymore was when the thermostat needed changing. We weren't fighting. That would have been easier. At least yelling means there's still passion. We were just managing. Running a household. Co-owners of a polite, functional silence. And then there was Jack. Jack Wagner wasn't just a handyman. He was one of those guys who made everything feel casual. Light. He'd joke with the kids, lean on the counter while I made coffee, tell stories about terrible landlords and flooded basements. He was Keith's friend. Sort of. More like a work connection that bled into our personal life. Keith would ask him to stop by when something broke, and Jack never seemed to mind. And somewhere in all those casual visits, I started laughing again. Real laughs. The kind that hit your ribs from the inside. He'd say something ridiculous like, "You ever notice washers always break after 9 p.m? Like they're unionized?" And I'd laugh harder than I had in months. He noticed when I got a haircut. He asked how my day was and actually waited for the answer. He listened. And no, I didn't fall in love with him right away. That's not how it works. It was slower. Quieter. More dangerous. Because it didn't feel like cheating. It felt like resurfacing. My best friend, Faith Lee, noticed something first. She came over for coffee one morning, and while we were sitting on the back porch, she squinted at me and said, "You're glowing. Either you're pregnant or someone finally complimented your banana bread." I laughed it off. Said it was probably the new moisturizer. But deep down, I knew what it really was. I was starting to feel seen again. Not just looked at. Seen. And that feeling. It's addictive. I kept telling myself Jack was just a friend. That I was just lonely. That it didn't mean anything. But I was lying. To Faith. To Keith. To myself. Because even though nothing had happened yet, not physically, something was happening. Something I couldn't name out loud. But it showed up in the way my heart fluttered when Jack knocked on the door. On the way I started wearing lip gloss again, just in case. By the way, Bridger's question didn't come from nowhere. I was holding everyone together. But inside? I was coming apart at the seams. And sooner or later, something was going to slip through the cracks. There's a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. That's the kind I lived in. Night after night, I'd go through the motions. Dinner. Dishes. Homework. Tuck Elaine in. Smile when she asked for one more story, even when my chest felt too tight to breathe. Then fold Keith's laundry like I was preparing a uniform for someone I didn't know anymore. I used to watch my reflection in the laundry room window. The glass turned into a mirror after dark. And every time I looked, I saw less of me. There were nights I'd just stand there, staring at that version of myself, the quiet, washed-out woman who ran everyone's life but hadn't felt held in years, and I'd cry. Not loud. Not the kind that shakes your shoulders. The silent kind. The kind you don't even wipe away because what's the point? You ever cry so quietly that even your tears feel tired? That was me. Keith never noticed. Or maybe he did and just didn't want to deal with it. I stopped expecting him to. He'd walk past me in the hallway, give me a half-hearted night, and disappear into his side of the bed like he was clocking out of a job. We stopped touching. We stopped talking unless it was logistics. Somewhere in all that silence, my son, Bridger, started picking up the slack. It wasn't intentional. But kids know things. Especially the quiet ones. He'd wait for me after Elaine fell asleep. Come into the kitchen, ask if I wanted help cleaning up. Or he'd climb onto the couch beside me when I thought I was alone and just lean into my side. No words. No questions. Just presence. That kid. He shouldn't have had to be my comfort. But on the worst nights, he was. One evening, I'd completely broken down in the laundry room, couldn't even make it upstairs. I just sank to the tile floor and sat there, surrounded by socks and static. Bridger found me. I didn't even hear him come in. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just handed me a towel, sat beside me, and said, "I don't like it when you look sad, Mom." I smiled. Told him I was fine. Said I was just tired. Same lie. Different night. He didn't believe me. But he didn't press. He just said, "Can we read the space book again?" So we did. We sat on that cold floor reading about astronauts and moon rocks while my heart quietly splintered into pieces. And he leaned his head on my shoulder like he was the one protecting me. That's when I knew something was off. Not with him. With me. I'd let my loneliness start leaking into the people I loved. And even though I hadn't said a word about what I was feeling, Bridger could feel it. He was 9. And somehow, he was carrying pieces of my sadness I didn't even realize I dropped. That's what emotional starvation does to you. It doesn't just eat you up. It spills. It spreads. And I was spilling all over the people I swore I'd protect. Keith never noticed. Faith checked in when she could, but she had her own stuff. 2 kids, a job, a marriage on the rocks. I didn't want to dump her. So I smiled. I said I was fine. And I read bedtime stories like I wasn't slowly falling apart inside. But Bridger kept watching me with those eyes. Like he was waiting for me to say something real. I didn't. Because I was scared. Scared of saying it out loud. Scared it would make it all true. So I just kept folding laundry, cooking dinners, tucking kids in. And telling myself it was just a rough season. That things would get better. That Keith would come back to me. But deep down, I think I already knew. I was starving for something I couldn't name. And the worst part? It felt easier to pretend I didn't need it than to admit how badly I did. It was a Thursday night, I think. Nothing special. Just another quiet, ordinary evening in a house full of unspoken things. Dinner had been quiet. Keith barely said 2 words between answering emails on his phone. Elaine talked about art class. Bridger picked at his food. I smiled, refilled water glasses, made sure everyone had what they needed, and no one noticed I didn't touch my plate. By the time I got Elaine to bed, I was already running on fumes. But Bridger was still wide awake, waiting in his room like he always did. It had become our thing, late-night talks that started with stories and sometimes wandered into feelings. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, flipping through the same book we'd read 3 times that week. When I walked in, he looked up and smiled. That soft, familiar smile that always melted me a little. I sat beside him and smoothed the blanket over his legs, tucking the edge under his feet the way he liked it. I asked, "Want me to read, or are you going to quiz me on alien facts again?" He grinned, leaned back against the headboard. "I'll let you read. Just this once." We laughed. And for a second, everything felt okay. Just a mom and her son. But then the silence slipped in, not heavy, not strange. Just still. And in that stillness, Bridger turned toward me. His voice was quiet. Calm. Like he was just thinking out loud. He said, "You always smile when Mr. Jack's around. Not like with Dad." That was it. That one sentence. No accusation. No judgment. Just a quiet observation. But the moment it hit the air, I felt my heart fall so fast. I swear it made a sound. It was like the whole room tilted sideways. I stopped breathing. My hands, which had just been fluffing his pillow, froze mid-motion. I looked at him. He wasn't being mean. He wasn't even trying to make a point. He was just noticing. And I realized, in that exact moment, he'd been watching me more closely than anyone else had in years. I swallowed hard. Tried to speak. Couldn't. Every word I knew vanished. He didn't look away. Didn't laugh it off. Didn't say he was joking. He just stared up at me with those clear, quiet eyes, waiting. And in that look, I saw everything I'd been denying. I saw how long I'd been pretending. How obvious it had become. How much I was bleeding through my smile. I tried to say something light, to fix it, to walk it back, but my throat felt like it was made of glass shards. So I just reached out and tucked his hair behind his ear, because it was all I could do. He didn't say anything else. He just leaned into the pillow, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Good night, Mom." And I sat there beside him, completely undone. Not because I'd been caught. But because the person who caught me was the one person I never wanted to hurt. And now? Now I couldn't even lie to myself anymore. I've always believed the most dangerous things in life don't start loud. They start soft. Polite. Safe. That's how it was with Jack. He'd started stopping by more often. Fixing the screen door, checking the water heater, helping Keith with little projects Keith never actually finished. At first, it was nothing. He'd show up with a bag of screws and a crooked smile, "Call me boss lady," ask if I had any of that banana bread left. I'd laugh. Say maybe. Offer him coffee like it was just good manners. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. I started baking when I knew he was coming. Wiping down the counters twice. Putting on lip gloss before noon. It wasn't about impressing him. That's what I told myself. But the truth? I wanted him to notice. Because he did. He noticed everything. Did you cut your hair? Your laugh sounds better than my whole Spotify playlist. You always smell like cinnamon. That on purpose? Keith hadn't noticed anything about me in years. Jack could walk in the door and say more with one compliment than my husband did in a whole week. And I didn't stop. I didn't shut it down. I fed it. I let the attention bloom. Slow and quiet like ivy growing up a forgotten wall. There was this one afternoon. Keith was out of town. Bridger and Elaine were at their friends' houses. It was just me and Jack in the kitchen. I made coffee. He sat on the bar stool, spinning it lazily, talking about a project he was working on. Something about pipes and permits. I wasn't really listening. I was watching the way his eyes followed me. How he smiled when I poured his cup. How his fingers brushed mine when I handed it to him, and this time, he didn't pull back. Neither did I. We just froze there for half a second longer than we should have. That half second? It said everything. He didn't speak, but his eyes asked the question. And mine, they answered it. We didn't kiss. Not then. But we didn't need to. There was this current between us, like the air had turned electric. Every move felt charged. Every silence, thick. He leaned on the counter and said, real low. If you were mine, I wouldn't go a day without touching you. I laughed. Soft. Too soft. Because what do you say to something like that? When your body's already screaming yes? I told myself I was just flattered. That it didn't mean anything. That I'd stop it before it went too far. But deep down, I already knew the line wasn't coming. It was already behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid next to Keith, his back to me, already snoring. And I stared at the ceiling, thinking about the way Jack's fingers felt grazing mine. I tried to tell myself it was just a crush. Just a moment. Just a spark. But sparks start fires. And I'd already started gathering the kindling. If you've ever felt something real, at the wrong time, with the wrong person, drop a warning in the comments. Hit like if you know what it's like to cross a line in your heart before your body ever moves. Subscribe if you believe silence can be louder than anything ever said. Keith had gone out of town for a conference. 3 nights in Chicago. Some networking thing, a big hotel, all the usual. He barely said goodbye when he left. Just kissed the air beside my cheek, mumbled something about checking in later. I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed, watching the car pull out. And instead of missing him, I felt relieved. That night, the kids were both at sleepovers, Bridger with Vincenzo, Elaine with Journey. I had the house to myself. And it was quiet. Too quiet. I walked room to room, straightening what didn't need straightening. I poured a glass of wine, turned on the TV, and muted it. I couldn't focus. Couldn't settle. The doorbell rang just after 8. It was Jack. He had a box in his arms, stuff Keith had left in his truck. A binder, a charger, something small for Bridger. I opened the door and blinked at him like I'd forgotten how to talk. He smiled. Didn't mean to bother you. Just figured I'd drop this off while I was nearby. I should have taken the box and said goodnight. But I didn't. I stepped back and said, "You want some tea?" He hesitated. Then nodded once. "Sure. Tea sounds good." We sat in the kitchen. Same table where I packed lunches. Signed field trip forms. Folded birthday party invites. Now, we were just two people sitting across from each other. Too close. Too quiet. I made peppermint tea. He asked how I was holding up. I said fine, like it meant something. But my hands were shaking when I set the mugs down. He noticed. He always noticed. We talked. About little things. Stupid things. The weather. A new show. The leak under the sink he still needed to fix. But under the words, something else was rising. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. And then he said it. Real low. Almost like it wasn't meant to be heard. You deserve more than silence, miracle. That broke me. I didn't mean to cry. But the tears just started. I wiped them quickly, embarrassed. Said, God, I don't even know why I'm. But before I could finish, he reached out and touched my face. Just one hand. Finger soft against my cheek, thumb brushing a tear away. I should have pulled back. I didn't. He held my face like it was something fragile. Something worth saving. And then, he leaned in. Not fast. Not greedy. Just close. Close enough for me to feel his breath. To see the question in his eyes. I answered it by not moving. Our lips touched, light, hesitant. My breath hitched. His hand slid behind my neck. And then we kissed again. Harder. Like everything we'd been pretending wasn't there, suddenly had a voice. And it was screaming. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes. Maybe hours. All I remember is the way his hands felt in my hair. The way my chest aches, not from guilt, not yet, but from how good it felt to be wanted. Really wanted to. And when it finally ended, when we pulled apart, breathless. Neither of us spoke. He looked at me like he didn't know whether to apologize or do it again. And me? I just sat there, staring at my tea, going cold on the table. I told myself it was just a moment. Just a slip. A soft place to land on a hard day. But I still felt it 3 days later. Still feel it now. After that night. Nothing was the same. Not in some dramatic, movie scene kind of way. There was no explosion. No screaming. No doors slammed shut. It was quieter than that. It started with the way Bridger stopped asking for bedtime stories. He didn't say why. Didn't say anything at all. He'd crawl under the covers before I even walked in and mumble goodnight with his back to me. No space books. No inside jokes. Just silence. I tried to tell myself it was normal. Kids pull away sometimes, right? They get older, more private. It's part of growing up. But I knew better. I could feel it in the way he flinched when I reached to ruffle his hair. In the way he avoided looking me in the eye. Like he didn't know who I was in. You and Jack got close lately, huh? Just like that. Casual. But not really. I choked on my sip. Said something like, "Oh, he just helps around the house sometimes." She raised an eyebrow. Didn't press. Didn't need to. The next day, Bridger was sitting at the kitchen table, doodling something into the margin of his homework. I was making dinner, or pretending to. When he looked up and said, "Are you gonna leave, Daddy?" I swear, the knife slipped right out of my hand. I turned to him slowly, trying to find words, but my mouth was dry. He didn't look angry. Or scared. He looked tired. Like he'd been carrying that question for too long. I walked over, sat beside him, reached for his hand. And he pulled it away. That one gesture shattered me. I wanted to scream. Tell him no, of course not. Tell him everything was fine. But I couldn't lie. Not to him. Not after everything I'd already spilled into him without meaning to. The guilt felt like a stone lodged under my ribs. I realized at that moment. I hadn't just hurt myself. Or my marriage. I'd passed it to him. Like a sickness. He was carrying the weight I should have held alone. And it was crushing him. I looked at my son, this boy who used to run to me with every scraped knee and silly joke. And I saw someone who didn't know where to put me anymore. Mother. Liar. Stranger. I opened my mouth to say something, to try and fix it. But all that came out was a whisper. I'm sorry. He stared at me for a long second. Then went back to his drawing without a word. And I just sat there, in a kitchen full of good smells and bad silence. Wondering when I stopped being his safe place. Wondering if I ever would be again. I'm back in Bridger's room again. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet that hums. His nightlight still sits in the corner, that soft blue glow he says helps him dream better. I don't know if he still believes that, or if he just doesn't want to sleep in the dark anymore. Sometimes I come in here after they've all gone to bed. Just to sit. Just to remember what used to feel simple. The bed's made. Neatly. Like he's trying to be older than he is. But I still see the folded edge of the blanket where he used to pull it over his face when he giggled. And every time I see that spot, every time I sit on this mattress, I hear his voice again. Mom, are you in love with Mr. Jack? He didn't say it with judgment. He said it with sadness. And somehow, that hurt more. Because deep down, I think he was asking something else. He was asking, can I still trust you? Are we still us? And I didn't know how to answer. Still don't. Jack's gone now. He doesn't come around anymore. Not even for tools Keith left behind. He slipped out of our lives the way he slipped in, quietly, without closure. And Keith? He still kisses my forehead before bed. Still thanks me for refilling the coffee. Still scrolls through emails while I talk. Our marriage is still standing. But it's like a house that survived a fire. The walls are there, sure. But the air smells like smoke. And no one talks about what burned. I haven't told him. I probably never will. Because honestly, it wasn't the kiss that changed me. It was being seen. Really seen. And liking it too much. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Sometimes you don't destroy your life by cheating. Sometimes you destroy it by finally being seen, and not wanting to go back to being invisible. Have you ever been caught in something you never planned to feel? Something that made you alive, and ashamed? If so, leave a candle in the comments. Hit like if you've ever tried to silence a feeling that just kept growing louder. Subscribe if you believe that even the mistakes we never meant to make deserve to be heard. Thank you for listening. And I'm sorry.